The Fender Telecaster Thinline. This is a surprisingly underrated guitar for as cool as it is. Today we're going to talk a little bit about both the function and the fashion of this guitar. We're going to talk about the history, and I have a guest. We're going to have Tanner Yates joining us to tell us about his experience in using a really unique Fender Telecaster Thinline in some live music and video settings. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. So, if you're talking about the Telecaster Thinline, the semi-hollow body Telecaster, the first thing you need to know is, where did it come from? Was it a function or fashion thing? Believe it or not, as cool as this idea is, it started off entirely functional. As the story goes, in the late 1960s, Fender had a limited supply of the light ash that they had formerly used on Telecaster guitars, but they had plenty of this heavier ash, which was unfortunately really too heavy for Telecaster bodies. Now, there was a luthier working for Fender at the time. You probably have never heard of this man. His name was Roger Rossmeisel, and he had previously worked for Rickenbacker. You should know who this guy is because he's actually very significant in rock history. He designed the Rickenbacker 300 guitar series, including the 325 as used by John Lennon, as well as some of the 4000 basses. Now, if that doesn't sell you enough on his significance, Roger's early apprentice was a guy named Semmy Mosley, who would later go on to found Mosrite. He also had previously worked briefly for Gibson, found his way over to Fender, and Fender entrusted him with routing these Telecaster bodies to weight relieve them. And what they did was they left the back off, routed it, and then actually glued a back on. Now, this is an American vintage. This is from an earlier series of American-style vintage runs. This is not the current one, but this is made like a 1969, which was one of the earliest. They would have come out in 68. So this is one of the earlier designs of what the Thinline Telecaster would have been like. Now, the electronics, the pickups would have been the same as the standard solid body Telecasters of the era. You know, the same bridge, they did a different pick guard. Electronics were mounted differently, but there wasn't really that much of a difference. The big difference came in 1971. That was the very, very famous Thinline Telecaster that many of you probably know even more than this one, that had the wide-range humbuckers. Believe it or not, the wide-range humbuckers were actually designed by the man himself, Seth Lover. Now, at this time, there was not just the change in the pickups, they also switched over out of the Telecaster ashtray bridge, the famous Telecaster ashtray bridge, and I'm not going to say upgraded, but changed it to other 70s style appointments, including the bullet truss rod, which actually was a good appointment, and the 3-bolt neck. Here's where it gets tricky. These guitars are totally awesome. Tonally, sonically, they do their own thing, which is what we're going to kind of transition into talking about now. The problem with them historically is that this was the CBS era, and this was getting a little deeper into the CBS era, and when you got into the 1970s in particular, for both the big companies, for both Gibson and Fender, you saw quality kind of starting to decline on a more steady basis. So even though this is an awesome design of a guitar, it's generally associated by a lot of players with an era where the quality wasn't as good. You know, you hear a lot about that regarding 70s Gibsons, you hear about it regarding 70s Fenders, and to kind of prove that point, all you need to do is look at the prices of 70s Gibson and Fenders versus 50s Gibsons and Fenders. Now, nowadays everything's crazy expensive, so people are still asking a lot of money, but I guarantee you can find a 70s Fender Thinline for a lot less money than you can find a 60s Telecaster, or especially a 50s Telecaster. Now, sonically, having a semi-hollow Telecaster is surprisingly brilliant, and I almost wish Fender had just kind of come up with it on their own without the issue of the wood, because it's just such an awesome idea. Telecasters are as associated with jazz as they are with many other genres, and having the semi-hollow design gives more of a shallowness to the tone, it gives a snap to the tone, and a pluckiness to the tone. It still retains its Telecaster character. It's almost like you have a Telecaster with essence of Gretsch thrown in. That's kind of the vibe that I get from this one, and I really enjoy playing it. So before we get too much further, I want to give you at least a sample on the neck. Now, I've often talked about this unique Telecaster neck tone that I really like, that's sort of hollow in the mid-range, very breathy, very woody, very, very transparent. Not all Telecasters can do it, and there's some mojo that goes on with different Telecasters and different Telecaster pickups as to which they can do. But I will say that the semi-hollow design definitely emphasizes this tone. So, before we get too much further, let's check out this neck pickup so that you can hear what I'm talking about. So I wanted to get the perspective of someone who's had a Thinline Telecaster for longer than I have, because mine's new, and a YouTube channel that I absolutely love is Yates Guitar, who does great work. We have an uncannily similar guitar collection, and he's had It is true. You've had an amazing Thinline Telecaster custom shop for a couple years now. So I've got Tanner Yates here with me, and I wanted to ask him a little bit about his guitar. How's it going, Tanner?
It's going well, man. Let me grab the guitar. Let's chat about it.
So I just got mine, and believe it or not, I'm an avid Tele player, but I really had no experience with a Thinline. So rather than just kind of sharing my initial thoughts with all people watching, I wanted to get the perspective of someone who's had one for a while. And I've not only seen you do some great YouTube videos with it, but I've also seen you perform some awesome material live with your band with it. So I wanted to, well, first of all, start off with, why did you want to get this particular guitar?
You know, I've never been a Tele guy personally. I love the way they sound. I've always kind of struggled with how they look. It just looks very basic to me, and some people that's part of the charm. And I see you've got, looks like a double bound one behind you. Yeah, I've always loved the double bound look, and actually that kind of look you have there, Lake Placid Blue maybe, it's kind of hard to tell, but I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's an American original.
Yeah, those are killer, and I love that double bound look. For me, a Tele has to be double bound. It just looks cooler, and then some kind of weird custom finish I'm a big fan of. The butterscotch kind of blonde, I appreciate it, but it never really did anything for me. But I've got a lot of guitars, you can see over here, and I didn't have a Tele, so I wanted to find a Tele, and I looked around forever, and I was looking at, you know, it's like the American original, that kind of stuff. And then this guy popped up, and I never really liked the Thinlines, to be honest, because of the specs that are associated with them, right? So usually it's later 60s, really thin neck, you know, just kind of not really my speed. But this popped up, and this is basically a 50s Thinline Tele. So this was something that Fender did. Actually, this is one of 14. I confirmed with Fender on that. It was a NAMM limited guitar, which is kind of cool. And yeah, so 50 spec, meaning it's got a 57 kind of soft V neck on it, so it's much thicker neck. It's got a hand-wired broadcaster bridge, hand-wired Texas Special neck. So it's just kind of the sound I like with looks that I think are just super rad. So that's why I chose this one.
It's an awesome guitar. The one that I got is this kind of cream color too. And as soon as I got it in a trade deal, and as soon as I saw it was available, I actually instantly thought of yours, because
yeah, it looks just like it. It's super similar.
Yeah, it's mine's an older American vintage reissue, but most of the thin lines that you see have that 70s styling. It's like the wood tone finish, or it could be a sunburst, but there's another aspect to that too, which I think throws a lot of people with the thin lines. Is kind of like what you were saying, but when they were in production, which we just talked about a little bit about the history, when they were in production was when some of the quality control was starting on the decline for Fender, and when things were getting more mass produced. So even though it's an awesome guitar design, I think people kind of associate it with that cheaper era, and they're more quick to write it off, because it's like you see a 70s Fender and you don't in any way get the same kind of mythical vibe to it like a 50s or a 60s Fender. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not an awesome guitar.
Yeah, no, I totally resonate with that. When I thought of a thin line, I didn't think of a really high quality instrument, just based off of some of those preconceived notions that, may be accurate, maybe not accurate. Those kind of things turn me off a little bit. I've always loved the looks. I think they look killer. But it was more the specs, it was more the build quality, those kind of things that turned me off of them initially. Of course, now I'm a fan, but
Sure. So from a practical aspect, and again, I especially ask this because I know you've played it with your band, and it's one thing to do stuff, when we're doing stuff in like, our kind of video studios or even a recording studio, that's one thing. But when you're actually taking it out and playing it with other musicians live playing with you, that's kind of, for me, when the pedal really hits the metal. And so what does it give you tonally, or even playing wise, that makes you pick it in certain situations? Like when do you go, yeah, I need this guitar? What sort of situations do you like it for?
Yeah, so right now with the band I'm playing in, this is my dedicated drop C sharp guitar. So basically E flat and then the low string tuned down. It's like drop D but down a half step. So yeah, this guitar just does that perfectly. It's got 10 to 52 strings on it, so kind of thicker on the low end. And it's just got this real meaty grit to it. My other guitar I use with the band is a Les Paul, and that kind of does the humbucker stuff. But this, what I love about this guitar is it's got this really sweet spot in the mid-range where it's not super scooped like a Strat might be, but it's not maybe too MIDI like a Les Paul is, or have too much push. This kind of fits right in the middle, right where I want it to be. And this particular guitar too, with the hand-wired broadcaster bridge, it doesn't cut your head off. It's not like crazy bright like maybe some later 60s Tellies might be, or at least what we think of that kind of tone. So I've always liked where it sits kind of in that range of the tonal spectrum, if you will. And having it it doesn't get too bloated too. So when you're playing lower, like drop C sharp, you want to make sure you still have definition on the low end. And this guitar kind of shelves off the bass. That's kind of the way I look at it. It definitely doesn't have tons of flub or anything like that, so it works really well for that kind of application.
Awesome. So I want to get to a clip of you playing now, and thank you for giving the perspective on this, because again, mine's pretty new, and so I've used it for some limited gigs and recording, but I definitely wanted to hear the perspective of someone who's put some more mileage on it. So for everybody watching, his channel is Yates Guitar. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to link to it above. He does a lot of great guitar videos, and also does a lot of great videos for those of you who are into things like Helix or Kemper, a whole range of stuff across multiple things. So Tanner, thanks again for joining. Let's cut to you playing here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
All right. right, so that was clearly a very, very different guitar, a very different cool take on the Telecaster Thinline, and you can hear there was a punchiness to Tanner's guitar that this one is a little bit different. This one has more of that kind of saggy pluckiness. His has that 50s sound kind of rolled in with those pickups, and it's a really awesome guitar, and that kind of proves that there's more to this guitar than them just being semi-hollow, and certainly a lot more than just being a written off, you know, late 60s, early 70s guitar design. So now I want to play a couple of samples of this. Of course, getting into the 70s, you're also going to be getting into more things like funk. There's your funk sample for the day. How's that? Some of my favorite players actually play this guitar, and please feel free to let us know what players you love that play Telecaster Thinlines. Now, one player that I absolutely love is Tab Benoit. He plays one of the wide-range humbucker models and just gets these amazing sort of fat southern bluesy tones, whether they're clean or lightly overdriven or full-out overdrive. It's just got great touch sensitivity and a really great tone that's totally unique to that guitar. Another one, now this is listed on Fender's website. Now, I've never actually seen him play one, and I have watched a lot of his videos, but if anybody knows a link to one, please feel free to leave it, but is Bill Frisell, who's absolutely one of my very favorite guitar players. And as soon as I saw that Fender listed on their site that Bill Frisell played Thinline Telecasters, I thought, boy, is that a tonal match made in heaven. That is just wonderful. His tone, his style of playing, his touch sensitivity, his phrasing, everything about his playing I think would absolutely suit the Tele Thinline. Now, he's obviously known for playing Telecasters. I just haven't seen him play the Telecaster Thinline, but I would like to believe that that's something that's happening. So lastly, obviously what a lot of people want to know is, does this still sound like a Tele? I've made the claim that it does. I definitely think it adds a pluckiness, it adds a sagginess to it, and again, there's a little bit less depth to the tone, but more airiness and more of a woodiness. What I would say is, particularly this model that has the classic Tele pickups, if you were to put it back to back with a solid body Telecaster, then yeah, you'll notice a difference. But in any other context, when there's not another Telecaster right next to it, it just sounds like a great Telecaster still. So you still retain that, you know, the Tele tone that everybody knows and loves, but you just get a little bit of a different take on it. So lastly here, I'm going to show it off on the bridge pickup, both clean and overdriven, for some country and kind of Americana rock tones to show how great this instrument is. So now let's check out some of those classic bridge tones. So today you are hearing this guitar into my Henry Amps SRT Plus, and for the overdriven tones I was using a Vick Audio Mount Pleasant. The jam at the beginning was from an original song called Savannah Morning. Please subscribe to Jack Fossett Official right here where you can hear my music. You can also support me on Patreon or make donations. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Also want to say thank you again to Tanner Yates for joining us today, and please subscribe to his channel, Yatesy Guitar. You can also find him on Instagram. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day.